The alpha who hunted me is now my only protector. A werewolf romance audiobook. The storm hit without warning, as if the sky itself had decided to punish the world. Rain pelted the winding forest road in sheets, soaking the thin jacket clinging to my shoulders. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, knuckles white as the tires threatened to slip on the slick asphalt. Somewhere up ahead, headlights sliced through the downpour. A lone vehicle parked sideways, abandoned or perhaps waiting to ambush. My heart didn't want to believe either. I had been running for days, moving from town to town, trying to stay ahead of memories that clawed at me relentlessly. Memories of my father's death, of the men who claimed to protect me but only ever seemed to betray. And now, this caught in the middle of a forest under a storm that seemed alive with its own wrath. My stomach twisted as I glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone or something following. Then I saw him, a man, impossibly tall, his silhouette etched against the jagged flashes of lightning, emerged from the trees. His coat, black and dripping, clung to him, and yet he moved with a predatory grace, like a wolf that had been hunting its prey for centuries. My first instinct was to freeze, to deny what my gut screamed. He was dangerous. But another part, a part buried beneath layers of fear and exhaustion, whispered that maybe, just maybe, he was the only person who could save me from myself. The car fishtailed on the slick ground, and before I could react, a fallen branch struck the hood with a splintering crack. Heart hammering, I slammed the brakes and jumped out, soaked to the skin, staring at him. He didn't speak at first. He just watched. Those eyes, dark, intense, unyielding, pierced through the downpour, and the fear lodged deep in my chest. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally, his voice low, commanding, yet tinged with something almost human, almost hesitant. I swallowed, unsure if I should run or beg. I got caught in the storm. My words sounded thin, fragile even to me. His eyes narrowed. "This forest isn't safe tonight. You shouldn't be alone." I wanted to argue, to insist I could handle myself. But the truth settled over me like the rain soaking through my jacket. I couldn't. Not tonight. Not with the storm and the shadows and the relentless feeling that something was hunting me. "Come with me," he said. And just like that, I found myself following him through the sheets of rain, my shoes sinking into mud, the wind tugging at my hair. He moved with a fluidity that was almost unnatural, too quick, too precise. The way he ducked a low-hanging branch, the way his boots barely left a mark on the saturated earth, made my chest tighten. Finally, he stopped at the edge of a small clearing. A cabin loomed ahead, smoke curling from the chimney despite the storm. It looked abandoned, or at least forgotten by time. He gestured for me to enter. Inside, the warmth hit me like a wave, and I shivered violently, squeezing my arms around myself. He moved to the fireplace, tossing another log onto the flames, and then he turned to me, still dripping, still imposing. "I don't usually let strangers in," he said, his eyes scanning me as if measuring some hidden quality. "Especially ones running from whatever you're running from." I hesitated, the weight of my past pressing against me. How could I tell him? How could I explain the danger that wasn't just in the storm, but in the shadows of my life? In the men who would stop at nothing to find me? He seemed to sense my hesitation. His gaze softened just for a fraction, and he stepped closer, though not too close. There was an undeniable heat radiating from him, a presence that made the room feel smaller, charged. "You're alone," he stated, not as a question but a fact. My throat tightened, but I nodded anyway. I don't have anyone." The words tasted like ash. I had tried to protect myself for so long, to survive. Alone, that admitting vulnerability felt like stepping off a cliff. And yet, standing there, staring at him, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years, the possibility of being protected, of not always having to run. He studied me a long moment, then finally said, "You can stay here tonight, but come morning you leave. Understand?" I nodded, though relief and hesitation warred within me. I didn't trust easily, not anymore. But something in his eyes, in the way he carried himself, suggested he wasn't just another predator waiting to strike. As I sat by the fire, trying to warm my numb fingers, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, not just by him, but by something else. Something primal and aware. The hairs on my arms stood on end as the shadows around the cabin seemed to twist and pulse, and then I realized, with a jolt that made my stomach drop, the storm outside wasn't just a storm. It was a cover. Something out there was moving, waiting. hunting. And somehow, my strange, silent protector had already noticed. He knelt beside me, his hand brushing against mine accidentally or maybe deliberately, and his gaze locked onto mine. "You're not safe out there," he murmured, almost to himself. "Not for a long time." The words sent a shiver down my spine. There was an edge to him, a rawness that spoke of violence, power, and control, but also a promise. A promise that if I trusted him, even just a little, he could shield me from whatever waited in the forest. And despite my fear, despite every instinct screaming to run, I felt something impossible, a pull toward him, magnetic and undeniable. Outside, the storm raged on, lightning illuminating the treetops in stark white bursts. Inside, the fire flickered, casting dancing shadows across his sharp features. I didn't know who he was, or why he had appeared at the exact moment I needed someone most. All I knew was that for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel completely alone, and I couldn't shake the feeling that meeting him wasn't an accident. Not by the storm, not by fate, not by anything in the world I thought I understood. Something had changed tonight. Something had begun, and I feared, even as part of me ached with a strange longing, that I had just stepped into a world from which there would be no turning back. The forest was quieter than I expected the next morning, as if the storm had swept not only the rain but all life away. Mist clung to the trees, curling around their trunks like ghostly fingers. Every step I took on the soft, damp earth made a faint squelching sound, my senses on high alert. I wasn't used to being in places like this anymore, not alone, not unprotected. And yet, the memory of last night's fire, the warmth, the presence of him, kept my feet moving forward. I barely noticed how far I had wandered until I heard it. A low rustle, almost too subtle to register, and then another like something was watching me from the shadows. My pulse spiked. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind or a small animal, but instinct, that deep, ancient instinct buried beneath fear, told me otherwise. "You shouldn't wander alone," came a voice from behind a thick oak, low, controlled, familiar. My heart leapt into my throat, and I turned sharply. He emerged from the mist like a shadow materializing into flesh, his eyes scanning me with that same piercing intensity as yesterday. The coat was gone now, replaced by a dark sweater that molded to his broad shoulders, his posture effortless, predatory. "I didn't hear you," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. The words came out breathless, shaky. He studied me, tilting his head slightly. "You think the woods are silent, but they speak. Every leaf, every branch, every movement tells a story." His gaze flicked over me, sharp and assessing. "And right now, the story says you're in danger." I shivered. The thought of danger lurking in the mist, following my every step, made my stomach knot. "I can handle myself," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he walked closer, his boots silent against the damp earth. I noticed how he moved like a predator and a guardian, all at once effortless and controlled. I wanted to step back, but my legs felt heavy, rooted by some invisible tether. "You've been running for a long time," he finally said. His voice wasn't accusing. It was a quiet observation, edged with something I couldn't name. "Not just from the storm or the forest, from people, from things that hurt you." I froze. How could he know? No one ever knew. I wanted to brush off the words to pretend I wasn't trembling, but he didn't give me a chance. He took a single step closer, his eyes locked on mine, searching, probing. "It's in your scent," he murmured, almost to himself. "Fear, sorrow, and a hunger for safety you don't believe you deserve." I swallowed hard, words sticking in my throat. My past wasn't something I shared easily or at all. Yet here, under the gray canopy, standing in the mist with him, I felt the walls around me start to crack. "You're different," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "You move like you don't belong in this world either." A flicker of something passed through his gaze, amusement, maybe, or something darker. "Perhaps," he said, "or perhaps I belong to much in places no one else dares to tread." The air shifted then. A sudden gust of wind rattled the trees, and I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, a flash of silver, a shadow slipping through the mist. My stomach twisted. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice tight. He didn't answer at first, just tensed, muscles coiling as if ready to spring. "Stay close," he ordered softly, his tone leaving no room for argument. He moved with a speed that was almost inhuman, circling us, scanning the mist with narrowed eyes. What are you? I asked, my voice trembling. It wasn't just curiosity, it was fear, fascination, and a strange recognition I couldn't explain. His gaze lingered on mine, unreadable. Something you wouldn't understand yet, he said, and there was a weight behind the words, a promise and a warning intertwined. I wanted to argue, to demand the truth, but the forest had shifted. The mist now seemed thicker, heavier, carrying whispers I couldn't place. They weren't words exactly, more like impressions, fragments of thought carried on the wind. I felt them brushing against me, making my skin prickle, my heart race. He noticed my tension immediately. The forest remembers, he said quietly, almost reverently. It remembers those who pass through, those who run, those who hide. It knows. I swallowed, struggling to make sense of what he was saying. Knows. What? That you are not entirely safe yet, he said, and that danger follows you more closely than the storm ever could. I glanced around, the mist swirling, shadows twisting into shapes my mind wanted to see as threats. And then I realized he wasn't just standing in the clearing with me. He was part of it, as if the forest and the man were connected, as if he could read every whisper of wind and leaf and shadow. Why are you helping me? I asked, finally daring the question. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he knelt, brushing a stray branch off my shoulder, his hand lingering a moment, longer than necessary. There was a charged silence, thick and unspoken, before he said, because someone has to. Because tonight, the woods would take you if I didn't. My throat tightened, and I looked away, unsure how to respond. The pull between us was undeniable. Now, raw and magnetic. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet every part of me ached to stay. The mist grew heavier, curling around our ankles, and I shivered, despite the warmth lingering from his nearness. I don't understand any of this, I whispered. Not yet, he replied, but you will, and when you do, you'll have to decide whether to trust what I am or run. A sudden snap echoed through the forest, a branch breaking under. Wait, and we both stiffened. His hand brushed mine again, almost a warning, almost an anchor. My pulse surged. Something was coming, something real, and I realized with a shiver that this was only the beginning. And as we moved deeper into the mist together, I couldn't shake the sense that every step forward pulled me further into his world, a world of shadows, power, and secrets that would change everything I thought I knew about safety, desire, and fate. The whispers of the forest grew louder, curling around us, pulling me into a story I hadn't yet chosen to belong to, and for the first time in my life, I wondered if I wanted to run at all. The forest seemed to close in around me as night fell, the mist thickening until every tree became a phantom, every rustle a potential threat. I had followed him farther than I should have dared, drawn by some pull I didn't understand, and yet I couldn't stop. Not when he moved through the darkness with such ease, a silhouette that seemed carved from shadow itself. I shouldn't have brought you this far, he muttered, almost to himself, his voice low and rough. It's not safe for someone like you. I glanced at him, my chest tight. Someone like me? The words came out bitter, but beneath them was fear I couldn't hide. I'm not used to this, to danger, to someone, I faltered, realizing how true it was, looking out for me. His dark eyes flicked to mine, unreadable yet heavy with something unspoken. You'll have to get used to it, he said simply, because danger doesn't care about who you are or what you deserve. It only cares that it finds you. We walked in silence, the sound of our boots muted by the thick moss covering the forest floor. I tried to keep my thoughts from spiraling about the storm, about the strange pull I felt toward him, about the whispers that seemed to follow us like invisible predators. And yet, I couldn't stop noticing the small details, the way his hand brushed against a branch with uncanny precision, the way his gaze seemed to penetrate the darkness, the subtle curve of his jaw as he observed the forest. You're different, I said finally, my voice barely more than a whisper. I don't know how, but there's something about you. He stopped abruptly, and I nearly ran into him. His eyes caught mine, intense and calculating, and a shiver ran down my spine. Different how? He asked, each word deliberate, slow, testing. I hesitated. I don't know. Powerful, but not just that. Like you belong somewhere no one else does. A shadow of a smile flickered across his face, brief and fleeting. You're perceptive, he said. Then his expression hardened. Be careful with that. People rarely appreciate being seen. I looked down, suddenly aware of how exposed I felt not just to him, but to everything around me. I'm used to being invisible, I admitted softly, used to being ignored or avoided. Until now, he studied me for a long moment, then stepped closer, the mist curling around us. His presence was overwhelming, like a heat that pressed against my chest, a magnetic force that both terrified and enthralled me. You're not invisible to me, he said quietly, almost as if admitting a confession he couldn't keep. I wanted to retreat, to tell myself I was imagining things, but the way he looked at me, the intensity of it, made it impossible to deny. My pulse raced, a mix of fear and something far more dangerous desire. Then the forest spoke again, a sound, low and deliberate, unlike any animal I had heard before, echoing through the trees. My body tensed instinctively, and his hand shot out, gripping my arm with a force that was firm but not harsh. Stay close, he ordered, his voice a growl that made my skin prickle. It's here. The mist shifted, and I caught sight of movement, something large, something fast, slipping silently between the trees. My stomach clenched, my heart hammering as adrenaline coursed through me. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. He stepped in front of me, body coiled, eyes scanning the shadows like a hunter. There was something in the way he moved, predatory, protective, terrifyingly precise, that made it clear he was no ordinary man. The air between us charged, thick with tension I couldn't name, a pulse that matched the quickening of my own heart. What are you? I whispered, my voice shaking. The words barely left my lips before he silenced me with a raised hand, not touching, just holding the space between us in absolute command. Not yet, he said. You're not ready to know, and it's not safe for you to know. The movement in the shadows grew closer, more deliberate. I felt the brush of it against my senses, a predatory awareness that made my hair stand on end. And then I realized, with a jolt, that I was trembling not from fear alone, but from the nearness of him, the undeniable pull that kept me glued to his side. He glanced down at me, eyes softening for a fleeting moment. Trust me, he said, and there was a weight in those words I couldn't dismiss. No one will hurt you while I'm here. I wanted to argue, to insist I could handle myself, but I couldn't. There was something primal in him, something protective and unyielding that made my instincts obey before my mind could even think. Then, it emerged from the mist, not fully, just a glimpse, a shadow, larger than any wolf I had ever seen, eyes glinting with a feral intelligence. I froze, caught between fascination and terror. He growled low in his throat, a sound that vibrated through the air, through me, a warning and a promise intertwined. The creature paused, sensing him, hesitating, and in that moment, I saw it, the raw power he held, the dominance, the unspoken rule that nothing dared cross him without consequence. I swallowed hard, heart hammering. You're not human, are you? He studied me, expression unreadable, and finally, a shadow of a smile curved his lips. No, he said simply, and neither is this world. Not for you. Not for me. But if you stay, you'll learn. And maybe, if you survive, you'll understand. I wanted to flee, to run back to a world where things made sense. But the pull was too strong, the connection undeniable. Even as fear knotted my stomach, a strange, dangerous excitement coursed through me. The forest, the mist, the storm from yesterday, it all felt like a prelude to something larger, something inevitable. And standing there, in the shadow of him, I realized I had already begun the journey I couldn't turn back from. The whispers of the forest wrapped around us like a warning, like a song only he could truly hear. And I knew, deep down, that my life had changed forever. The cabin felt like a fragile sanctuary when we returned, the storm long gone but its echoes still clinging to the damp wood and the scent of wet earth. I sank onto the worn sofa, still, shivering, my fingers brushing against the warmth that lingered from the fire he had kept burning. Its light flickered against the walls, dancing shadows that twisted like living things. Every shadow seemed to carry a whisper, a memory, a warning. The forest outside had quieted, but its presence pressed against the windows, reminding me that danger still lingered beyond the walls. He moved around the room with a silent grace, tending to the firewood, checking the windows, a watchful presence that never left my awareness. I tried to study him, to see the man behind the predatory calm, but it was impossible. There was an edge to him, an unyielding precision in every movement, yet beneath that was something else, something human, faint but undeniable, I wanted to speak, to ask the questions burning in my mind, but words felt heavy, useless against the weight of the night's events. The forest, the shadows, the creature or whatever it had been still lingered in my thoughts, an insistent reminder that I was stepping into a world I didn't yet understand. "You're tense," he said suddenly, his voice soft, almost intimate, breaking the quiet. I looked up, startled, and found him leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, dark eyes fixed on me. There was no judgment in his gaze, only a sharp awareness that made my chest tighten. I began, then stopped, unable to form a coherent sentence. "I'm not used to people," I admitted finally, the words spilling out with a fragile honesty I didn't intend to share. He took a step closer, and though I wanted to recoil, I found myself rooted to the spot, drawn to the magnetic pull of his presence. "I can tell," he said simply, his voice low and calm. "You've been carrying things alone for a long time. Fear, loss, doubt, and you've learned to survive by hiding it." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. He was right, of course. Every day had been a careful balance of concealment and endurance. I had built walls so high, so thick, I didn't know if anyone could ever breach them. And yet, standing there, I felt one of those walls cracking, brick by brick, under the weight of his scrutiny. "Why? Why do you care?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He paused, studying me, and I caught a fleeting shadow cross his face, something raw, something almost vulnerable beneath the mask of control. "Because someone has to," he said finally, his words simple but heavy with unspoken meaning. "And because I see you, truly." The simplicity of it struck me, and for the first time in days, I felt the tight coil of panic in my chest loosen slightly. Someone saw me, not the surface I showed the world, not the carefully curated persona, but me. And it terrified me almost as much as it relieved me. I wanted to turn away, to retreat into the safety of my solitude, but I couldn't. His presence was too commanding, too impossibly anchored in some primal certainty that made my instincts obey. We sat in silence then, the fire crackling, shadows flickering across the walls, each of us absorbed in our own thoughts, yet acutely aware of the other. I noticed how his jaw tightened when he stared into the flames, the subtle tension in his shoulders, and I realized he was guarding something just as fiercely as he was guarding me. The cabin felt alive, in a way I couldn't explain. The boards creaked as if they remembered footsteps I hadn't taken, and the wind outside carried hints of something I couldn't place, an unfamiliar scent, metallic and earthy, brushing against my senses. It set my teeth on edge, but there was comfort in his nearness, in the invisible shield he seemed to extend over me. "Tell me," I said softly, breaking the quiet. "What are you hiding?" He didn't answer immediately, his gaze lingering on the flames. The silence stretched, heavy and charged, until finally he spoke, his voice measured and deliberate. "Not yet," he said. "There are things you're not ready to understand. Things that could hurt you if you knew too soon." I frowned, frustration flaring alongside curiosity. "I've already seen enough to know this world isn't safe. How much worse could it be?" He finally looked at me, and in that gaze, I caught something fleeting, an acknowledgement of danger, a warning, and impossibly, something like trust. "Worse than you can imagine," he admitted quietly. "But that doesn't mean you have to face it alone." The ember glow reflected in his eyes, and I saw a storm there, a dark tempest of something unspoken. There was pain, perhaps regret, lurking beneath the layers of control. It drew me in, as if our vulnerabilities were mirror images, though I dared not reach for them fully. For a long while, we simply sat together, the fire's warmth mingling with the storm of emotions I couldn't yet name. I felt him there not just as a protector, but as a presence that seemed to resonate with something deep inside me, a tether to a part of myself I had long forgotten. Every flicker of flame mirrored the quiet tension between us, warmth, danger, and the thrill of a connection I didn't know I was ready for. "You don't have to speak," he said after a while, his tone gentle, almost tender. "Just be here. Let yourself rest, even if only for tonight." I nodded, words failing me. There was something about the way he said it, a quiet insistence that I allow myself a small measure of reprieve, that made my chest ache with unspoken longing. For the first time since my father's death, since the betrayals that had forced me to run, I felt a fragile sense of safety. Outside, the night deepened, and the forest whispered its secrets, curling around the cabin with an almost sentient awareness. The wind moaned through the pines, carrying the scent of wet earth and something faintly metallic, hinting at hidden dangers. I shivered despite the warmth, but I didn't move from the fire's edge. His presence beside me was a stronger anchor than the fear that threatened to pull me under. Tomorrow, he said quietly, almost to himself, things will begin to change. I glanced at him, puzzled. Change how? He didn't answer, only let his gaze linger on the fire, shadows dancing over his sharp features. There was a quiet weight in the silence, an unspoken promise that whatever awaited me, I wouldn't face it alone. I didn't understand it yet, not fully, but the ember of trust he had sparked within me was kindling into something I couldn't ignore. And as I drifted toward a hesitant, uneasy sleep, I realized that night had shifted something inside me. The ember of trust he had kindled was burning brighter than I expected, and perhaps if I allowed it, it could grow into something stronger, a bond that could withstand storms, shadows, and the dangers lurking just beyond the cabin walls. I clutched the thin blanket around me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself hope. Dawn broke slowly over the forest, painting the mist in muted golds and grays. I woke to the quiet hum of the cabin, the fire reduced to glowing embers, and the strange, steady presence of him across the room. He was seated by the window, eyes scanning the tree line as though the forest itself had secrets he could read. I watched him for a long moment, mesmerized by the subtle strength in his posture, the tension that lingered even in stillness. Morning, I said softly, not wanting to disturb him too abruptly. He turned, his dark gaze meeting mine, sharp and unreadable. Morning, he replied. There was a measured calm in his tone, but beneath it lay a current of alertness that set my nerves on edge. I dressed quickly, the chill of the cabin pressing against my skin, and followed him outside. The forest was alive with the soft sounds of early morning birds warbling cautiously, leaves rustling in the gentle wind, but there was something else, a subtle vibration in the air that made the hairs on my arms rise. He moved ahead of me silently, boots sinking into the moss without a sound. The storm was only the beginning, he said, his voice low, carrying an unspoken weight. There are things in these woods that prey on weakness, on fear. You must understand this isn't just about survival. It's about being unseen. Until you're ready to be found. I shivered, both from the cold and the intensity of his words. Found by what? I asked, my curiosity edged with fear. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stopped at a clearing, scanning the perimeter with a predator's precision. Something is coming, he murmured. Something that doesn't belong here, and it's been following you longer than you realize. I felt a tight coil of panic in my stomach. Following me? What do you mean? Before he could respond, a sound sliced through the morning air, a low, guttural growl that didn't belong to any animal I knew. My heart leapt, and instinctively I stepped closer to him. He turned, hand brushing mine, not in comfort but as a silent tether, and the pull of his presence steadied my racing pulse. There, he said, his voice a growl itself now, deep and dangerous. A movement shifted in the mist, a shadow too large to be human, too deliberate to be a deer. It slinked just beyond the clearing, eyes glinting with a cold intelligence that sent ice through my veins. I wanted to run, to flee into the cabin's safety, but my feet remained rooted. The pull of him, the magnetic gravity of his presence, kept me frozen, caught between terror and fascination. He crouched slightly, muscles coiled, ready. It's testing you, he said, testing me, but it doesn't know that I protect what's mine. I caught my breath, feeling a strange, unsettling surge of warmth at his words, even as fear gripped me. What is it? I whispered, barely daring to breathe. Something old, he replied, eyes never leaving the shadow. Something that shouldn't have crossed into your path, and yet, it has. The creature stepped closer into the golden haze of dawn, revealing itself more clearly. It wasn't quite wolf, not quite human. Its limbs were elongated, movements unnatural, almost fluid in a way that defied gravity. My stomach lurched, and I stumbled back, but he was immediately there, hand steadying my shoulder, gaze sharp and commanding. Stay behind me, he ordered. His voice carried authority, a subtle reminder that this was his territory, his protection, and in his presence, I could feel a barrier against the danger. Time seemed to stretch as the shadows circled, aware of us, testing, sniffing the air like a hunter. I realized with a jolt that this forest was alive in ways I didn't understand. The trees seemed to lean closer, the mist swirling with intent, and the creature's gaze intelligent, piercing never left him. It's assessing your strength, he murmured, almost to himself. And mine. I couldn't take my eyes off him. There was something mesmerizing in the way he moved, controlled, fluid, dangerous yet protective. Every instinct screamed that he wasn't just a man. He was something more, something that belonged both to this world and to the shadows that haunted it. Then, without warning, the creature lunged. I gasped, frozen in shock, but he was faster. A blur of movement, and he intercepted the shadow with an almost inhuman strength. I heard a low growl, a clash of force that made the ground beneath my feet tremble. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My heart pounded, every nerve alive, as I watched him shift, almost imperceptibly, into a form that wasn't entirely human. The power radiating from him was palpable, a force I couldn't hope to resist or even comprehend fully. When it was over, the creature retreated, slipping back into the mist as silently as it had come. I sank to the ground, trembling, overwhelmed by a mixture of awe and terror. He knelt beside me, his hands warm and steady on my arms. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice softer now, but still carrying that underlying strength that made my pulse race. "No, I'm fine," I managed, though my body shook with adrenaline and fear. He studied me, his gaze lingering, almost searching, and for a fleeting moment, vulnerability flickered in his dark eyes. "You need to understand," he said quietly, "that danger will not wait, and neither will the forest. You are tied to this world now, whether you understand it or not." I nodded, unable to speak. His words were heavy, true, and frightening. And yet, in the midst of the fear, there was a strange, undeniable sense of trust, fragile but real, that I felt growing between us. As the mist settled again, wrapping the forest in its silent watch, I realized that this was only the beginning. The shadow had tested us, tested him and indirectly me. And though I didn't fully understand the rules of this world, I knew one thing: my survival depended on him. And maybe, in ways I wasn't ready to admit, I wanted it too. The night was unnaturally still. Not even the wind dared to disturb the silence, as if the entire forest held its breath, waiting. I sat on the creaking wooden porch of Elijah's cabin, my knees pulled close to my chest, the cool air kissing my damp skin. The storm from earlier had passed, but the electricity in the air hadn't faded. It clung to me like an unspoken warning. Inside, Elijah moved with a quiet intensity, pacing like a predator caged too long. I could hear his steps, steady yet restless, the sound of boots against wood grounding me and frightening me all at once. Since the night he'd saved me from the rogue wolves, his presence had become a constant, uninvited shadow in my life. But tonight felt different. Something was building. I could sense it: the weight in his shoulders, the way his chest rose and fell faster than usual, the flash of something primal hidden in his dark, watchful eyes. I swallowed hard, brushing my fingers against the rough edges of the porch railing. "Elijah," my voice broke slightly, but I steadied it. "What are you hiding from me?" The silence that followed was sharp, almost suffocating. He didn't answer immediately, and when he finally stepped into the doorway, leaning against the frame, his expression was unreadable. Shadows pooled under his jawline, soft moonlight carving him into something otherworldly. "I told you before, Ivy," he said, his tone low, controlled. "Some truths are better left buried." "That's not an answer." I met his gaze, refusing to let my fear show. "Every time I look at you, I feel something. Like I should know you. Like my bones remember you. But I don't understand why. And then there's the way those things came after me. You know what they were, don't you?" His jaw clenched, his nostrils flaring slightly. A muscle ticked in his cheek, betraying the calmness he was trying so hard to hold onto. "You're not safe here," he said instead, ignoring my question. "The rogues won't stop. They scented you that night, and once they mark prey, they don't give up easily." "Then tell me why." I stood, my voice rising despite myself. "Tell me why they're after me. Why they called you Alpha. Why I saw one of them heal from a wound that should have killed him." "Stop pretending I can't handle it, Elijah. I deserve the truth." For a long, painful moment, he said nothing. His fingers flexed at his sides, as though he were restraining himself from reaching for me or from pulling away completely. Then, without a word, he turned and started walking toward the tree line. "Elijah," I called after him, frustration clawing through my chest. "Come with me," he said, his voice sharp but quiet. "If you want answers, follow me. But understand this: Ivy. He paused, glancing back over his shoulder, his eyes gleaming unnaturally in the moonlight. Once you know, there's no turning back. My breath hitched, but my feet moved before my mind could catch up. I followed him into the darkness, the soft crunch of dead leaves beneath my boots echoing in my ears. The deeper we went, the thicker the forest grew, branches twisting like skeletal hands, swallowing us whole. After a while, Elijah stopped near a clearing bathed in silver light, where an ancient oak tree towered over us like a sentinel. His shoulders rose and fell with slow, deliberate breaths, as though he were summoning courage or control. This land, he said finally, his voice rough, was cursed long before you came here. He stepped closer to the oak, resting his palm against its bark, his fingers grazing over scars etched deep into the wood, like claw marks frozen in time. The packs have fought over it for generations. Blood, betrayal, revenge, it never ends. I stayed silent, my chest tightening as his words settled over me like fog. And you, he said, turning toward me, his expression unreadable, you walked into the middle of it. You were never supposed to know this world existed. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. What are you, Elijah? His throat worked as if swallowing back something heavier than words. When he finally spoke, his voice was a whisper. Not what? Who? He exhaled slowly, his control slipping with every syllable. I am Alpha of the Silver Claw Pack. My lips parted, but no sound came out. The word Alpha hit me like a lightning strike. Every strange moment, the way his wounds healed faster than they should, the way his presence commanded even the rogue wolves suddenly made sense and yet left 1,000 more questions clawing at me. You, my voice trembled. You're a werewolf. The look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know before he even nodded. A long silence stretched between us, heavy and fragile. My mind spun, trying to process everything. But before I could speak again, the sound of twigs snapping in the distance made Elijah tense instantly. He turned sharply, his nostrils flaring as his head tilted, listening. In one smooth motion, he stepped in front of me, shielding me with his body. Elijah, stay behind me. His voice was a growl now, low and guttural, vibrating through the air. From the shadows, several figures emerged, 3 men, but not entirely men. Their movements were unnatural, almost predatory, and their eyes glowed faintly in the dark. The scent of danger was thick enough to taste. Rogues, Elijah muttered under his breath. His voice deepened, rough edges bleeding into something feral. One of the rogues smiled a sharp, unsettling grin. Alpha? He drawled mockingly. Still hiding the little human? Something in Elijah snapped. His muscles coiled like springs beneath his shirt, his breathing rough and erratic. For the first time since I'd met him, I saw his control unraveling, his instincts taking over. Leave now, Elijah warned, his voice layered with something wild, something inhuman. Or you'll regret stepping onto my land. The rogue only laughed, and that was his mistake. Elijah moved fast, blindingly fast. One moment he was standing beside me, the next he was in front of the rogue, slamming him into the earth with impossible strength. I gasped, frozen in shock as the sound of tearing fabric and cracking bones filled the clearing. But before Elijah could finish him, the other 2 rogues lunged. Elijah snarled, the sound guttural and earth-shaking, and then it happened. Before my eyes, his body began to change. His bones shifted beneath his skin, his spine arching, muscles stretching, his dark hair growing thicker, longer. His shirt tore apart as fur erupted across his body, his claws extending like blades. His eyes, those piercing silver eyes, glowed brighter than the moon itself. In seconds, Elijah was gone. In his place stood a towering wolf, massive and terrifying, his fur dark as shadows, and silver streaks glinting under the moonlight. His snarl sent vibrations through the earth beneath my feet, and then the battle began. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering in my chest, unable to move, unable to breathe as claws slashed, teeth tore, and the clearing became a whirlwind of violence and fury. I'd wanted the truth, but now that I had it, I wasn't sure I could survive it. Somewhere deep inside me, something ancient stirred. A strange warmth spread through my veins, my skin prickling as though responding to something unseen. My breath quickened, but I forced myself to focus on Elijah, on the impossible reality unfolding before me. This wasn't just his secret anymore. It was mine too. The night stretched endlessly, draped in a silver haze beneath the looming full moon. The Forest was alive with whispers, the rustle of leaves, the distant howls, and the subtle shift of something unseen moving through the darkness. Elena stood at the edge of the small creek near the cabin, her boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. The air was colder tonight, sharp enough to make her breath curl like mist. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to settle the unease that coiled in her stomach like a restless serpent. Adrian hadn't returned since sunset. He had left without saying a word, his eyes dark and haunted in a way she had never seen before. The silence between them since the last argument gnawed at her, but what unsettled her even more was the feeling deep in her bones that something terrible was coming. A branch snapped behind her. Elena turned sharply, heart hammering. But there was nothing there except shadows shifting under the swaying trees. She told herself it was just the wind, yet her instincts screamed otherwise. She had learned to trust those instincts lately, especially since Adrian told her the truth about what he was: half man, half wolf, alpha, a secret bound by blood, by ancient laws, and by enemies that lurked in the darkness. Elena? She gasped and spun around, relief washing over her when she saw Adrian emerge from the trees, except something was different. His shirt was torn, claw marks slashed across his arm, and his breathing was ragged as though he had been running for miles. What happened? She rushed toward him, reaching instinctively, but he stepped back, shaking his head. Stay inside. Lock the doors. His voice was low, rough, strained, almost like a growl. Her heart seized. Adrian, you're hurt. It's not my blood. He finally looked at her, and the raw intensity in his amber gold eyes rooted her to the ground. They've found us. Elena froze. Who? He hesitated, scanning the tree line as though expecting shadows to leap out at any moment. Rogues, he whispered, his jaw tightening. And they're not just passing through this time. They came for me. Her breath hitched. The stories he had told her about rogues still haunted her, outcasts and rebels who refused to obey pack law, violent and unpredictable, bound by bloodlust and vengeance. But if they were here, that meant the cabin wasn't safe anymore. Before she could ask more, a low guttural howl echoed through the night. It was close. Too close. Adrian's body tensed, his muscles coiled like steel under his skin. Go inside. Elena, now. Her lips parted to argue, but one look at him silenced her. This wasn't just a warning, it was a plea. Elena hurried back to the cabin, locking the door behind her. Though the wooden walls suddenly felt paper thin, she pressed her back against the door, her chest rising and falling rapidly as another howl cut through the silence. Minutes passed, maybe hours. She couldn't tell. When the growls started outside, low, menacing, circling, she froze where she stood. Then, chaos erupted. A crash. A roar. Snarling. Snapping jaws. Through the small window, she caught glimpses of shadows lunging, muscles twisting, teeth flashing under the moonlight. And Adrian. God, Adrian moved like a storm unleashed. She had seen him shift only once before. But this time it was different, more violent, more primal. Fur burst through skin, bones stretched, his roar merging with the howl of the wind. He launched himself at one of the rogues, slamming it into the dirt with such force the ground seemed to tremble. But there were three more. One lunged at his side, and Adrian let out a snarl so deep it shook her to her core. Claws slashed, blood sprayed, bodies collided, and Elena's trembling hands covered her mouth as she tried to silence the scream building in her throat. And then, silence. Elena dared to peek through the window again, her heart in her throat. The clearing was scattered with blood and motionless bodies, but Adrian stood, chest heaving, amber eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Except, something about him didn't look right. His shoulders trembled. His claws dug into the earth. His breaths came ragged and broken. And for the first time since meeting him, Elena felt a flash of fear. Adrian? She whispered through the door crack. His head jerked toward her. Too fast, too sharp. His glowing eyes locked on hers, wild and unrestrained. Elena, he rasped, his voice barely human now. Stay back. She froze, confusion and fear swirling violently inside her. Why? What's happening? His chest rose and fell rapidly, his muscles twitching under the strain of holding himself back. The blood, the moon. I'm losing control. Before she could respond, his knees buckled, his body collapsing to the earth, shaking violently. Elena flung the door open, rushing to his side, despite every instinct, screaming at her to stay inside. Adrian, look at me. She grabbed his face in her hands, forcing him to focus on her. but his gaze was slipping, swallowed by the feral side of his wolf. She whispered softly, desperately, "Come back to me, please." Something flickered in his gaze, recognition. Faint but there. His clawed hand curled around hers, grounding himself. Finally, his breathing slowed, his trembling eased, and he collapsed against her shoulder, exhausted and bleeding. For a moment, there was only silence. Until he whispered, his voice hoarse and broken, "They weren't here just for me, Elena. They were hunting you." Her entire body went cold. The rogues weren't random. This wasn't coincidence. Someone knew where she was and someone wanted her dead. And in the distance, beyond the tree line, another howl rose. Louder, closer. The battle wasn't over. The sky was a deep canvas of shadow, painted with streaks of crimson from the rising blood moon. Its eerie glow draped the forest in a haunting silver-red hue, casting elongated shadows across the mossy ground. The wind carried the scent of pine, damp earth, and something else. Something feral. Leela walked close to Kale, her boots crunching softly on fallen leaves. Every sound in the forest felt amplified under the blood moon: the rustle of branches, the distant hoot of an owl, the whisper of water flowing somewhere far away. Her heart drummed in her chest, yet she couldn't tell if it was fear or the unspoken tension hanging between them. Kale hadn't said a word since they'd left the cabin. His broad shoulders were tense, his hands curled into fists at his sides. The wild energy radiating off him was palpable, like static before a storm. "You're doing it again," she finally whispered, her voice trembling slightly. He slowed, glancing back at her. "Doing what?" "Shutting me out," she replied, hugging her jacket tighter. "You promised you'd explain why everyone's been hunting me, why the Alpha Council wants me dead, and why you—" She hesitated, the next words tangling on her tongue. "Why you keep looking at me like that." His jaw tightened, and for a moment, silence stretched between them like an invisible thread pulled taut. Then, with a sharp exhale, Kale looked away, his gaze fixed on the glowing horizon. "You shouldn't have come this far into our world, Leela." His voice was deep, husky, carrying a weight she hadn't heard before. "The council sees you as a threat. I can't change what's been decided." Her stomach dropped. "So what am I to you then? A mistake?" Kale spun around, his amber eyes blazing under the blood moonlight. "You were never a mistake," he growled, his voice sharp but laced with something dangerously tender. He took a step closer, the wild energy around him intensifying until Leela could almost feel his heartbeat pounding in the air between them. The blood moon shimmered above, and she noticed his pupils dilating, the faint edges of his canines sharpening when he spoke. He was fighting it, the pull of the shift, the call of his wolf. "Then why won't you tell me?" she demanded, her own voice rising, fragile yet fierce. "I deserve the truth, Kale." His breathing grew ragged, and for a moment, she thought, he'd walk away like he always did when emotions threatened to tear him apart. But instead, he closed the distance between them, his hand brushing against hers, a hesitant, restrained touch, as if even the smallest connection might ignite something neither of them could control. "You want the truth?" His voice was low now, almost breaking. "Then listen closely, because once you know, there's no turning back." Leela swallowed hard, nodding. "You're not just some human caught in our war," he said finally, his words slicing through the cold air. "You're bound to me, Leela, by blood, by fate. You're my fated mate." The world tilted beneath her feet, her chest tightened, her breath faltering as the meaning of his confession sank in. Fate, soul bond, words she'd only heard in half-whispered legends from the townsfolk, stories about the ancient magic that tied wolves to their destined partners. But this couldn't be real. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That's not possible. I'm not one of you. I'm not a wolf." Kale's expression darkened, the conflict raging in his gaze as he reached out and cupped her face with both hands, forcing her to meet his burning stare. "You don't have to be," he said softly, his voice rough with longing and restraint. "The bond chose you. The moment I first caught your scent in the woods, I knew. My wolf, he's been calling to you ever since." Fighting it is like trying to stop breathing. Her lips parted, but no words came. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the distant sounds of wolves, some mournful, some wild, some hunting. Leela stumbled back, her pulse hammering. "You should have told me sooner," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You kept this from me all this time?" "I wanted to protect you," Kale said, his jaw tight, frustration radiating from him. "The council believes the bond makes you a weakness. They'd kill you if they knew the truth. And now? She asked bitterly, tears stinging her eyes. Now I'm supposed to accept that my life isn't mine anymore? That I'm bound to a world I don't understand? Kale's expression softened at her pain, but his next words were raw, almost desperate. You're not just bound, Leela. You are my world. Her breath caught, but before she could respond, a low, guttural growl erupted from somewhere deep in the woods, snapping both of their heads around. Kale tensed instantly, pulling her behind him as his body shifted subtly, shoulders rolling, muscles tightening, every inch of him becoming more predatory. The growl was followed by another, and then another. The air grew heavy with the unmistakable scent of wolves. They found us, Kale hissed, his amber eyes glowing brighter under the blood moon. The hunters are close and they're not here to talk. Leela's heart pounded, adrenaline flooding her veins. She could hear them now, the snapping of branches, the rush of padded feet against damp earth. Shadows darted between the trees. Too fast to track, Kale turned to her, gripping her shoulders, his expression urgent and fierce. Listen to me, he said, his voice sharp but steady. Stay behind me, no matter what happens. If they take me down, you run back to the cabin and don't look back. Do you understand? Leela shook her head violently. I'm not leaving you. This isn't a debate, he snarled, but there was no anger in his tone, only fear. Fear for her. The first wolf burst through the shadows then, its black fur slick with moonlight, teeth bared in a vicious snarl. Kale stepped forward, his entire body shifting in an instant, bones snapping, claws tearing through flesh as his form exploded into that of a massive, obsidian-coated wolf. The transformation was brutal, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. Leela stumbled back, her breath stolen by the sight her protector, her fated mate, no longer a man but the beast she had feared and longed for in equal measure. And then, chaos erupted as the pack descended upon them. The battle had begun, the storm had finally passed, but the silence it left behind was louder than the howling wind had ever been. The forest felt alive, not with peace, but with anticipation. The heavy scent of pine and wet earth clung to the air, and every shadow seemed to breathe. My pulse thrummed in my ears as I walked behind Lucian, my boots sinking into the damp soil, my breath coming out in faint clouds against the chilling night. Something had shifted between us after last night, after the truth about his pack, his curse, and my place in it came tumbling into the open. I should have run. I should have wanted nothing to do with him, with this terrifying world of claws and blood, but my body betrayed me, because every step closer to Lucian felt like a step closer to myself. He moved ahead of me with effortless grace, his tall, broad frame cutting through the mist curling between the trees. The moonlight kissed his dark hair, and for a fleeting moment, I imagined reaching out, threading my fingers through it, grounding myself in his warmth. But I quickly looked away, my cheeks heating despite the cold. You should stay closer, he said, his deep, gravelly voice breaking the fragile silence. I frowned, hugging myself as I quickened my pace to walk beside him. I thought you said I was safe with you. You are, he replied without looking at me, his jaw tightening. But being safe doesn't mean being careless. Not tonight. Something in his tone sent shivers down my spine. I wanted to ask what he meant, but I was afraid of the answer. For a while we walked without speaking, the only sounds being the crunch of wet leaves beneath our boots and the distant hoot of an owl. But when we reached the ridge overlooking the valley, Lucian stopped abruptly, nostrils flaring, his entire body tense as if carved from stone. Lucian, I whispered, stepping closer. His hand shot out instinctively, pulling me behind him. His touch burned like wildfire against my wrist. Stay behind me, he ordered, his voice low, commanding, almost primal. Then I smelled it, sharp, metallic, unmistakable. Blood. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, long and mournful. It didn't sound like Lucian's pack. My throat went dry. What is it? Rogues, he muttered, his amber eyes darkening with something feral. They're close. My heart thundered as I glanced around the forest, expecting something monstrous to leap from the shadows at any moment. But Lucian didn't move, not yet. He was listening, his body vibrating with restrained energy, his heightened senses reading the world around us in ways I couldn't comprehend. Then, as though on some silent signal, he grabbed my hand and started moving fast, weaving between trees, silent and deadly, pulling me along. Lucian, wait, they've caught your scent, he hissed, his breath ragged. We need to move. My chest tightened painfully. My scent? Why me? He glanced back at me briefly, his expression unreadable. "Because you're mine." The words slammed into me like a tidal wave, knocking the air out of my lungs. He didn't elaborate, didn't give me a chance to question him, just tightened his grip and pulled me harder through the forest as if the very earth beneath us had turned hostile. Somewhere behind us, branches snapped, and I caught sight of two shadows darting between the trees fast to fast. Panic surged through me, but Lucian's voice cut through it like steel. "Don't look back. Just run." And I did. I ran with everything I had, the cold air slicing into my lungs, my legs burning with effort. I couldn't hear anything except my own pounding heartbeat and the roar of blood in my ears, but Lucian's presence was a constant ahead of me, beside me, behind me, always there, always watching. Finally, we broke into a small clearing bathed in silver light. Lucian stopped, pushing me gently behind him, his shoulders squaring as he faced the darkness, and then they emerged. Two figures stepped out from the shadows, their eyes glowing unnaturally, their movements predatory. They weren't in wolf form yet, but there was something unmistakably wrong about them, wild, untamed, dangerous. "Lucian," one of them sneered, his voice deep and mocking. "Didn't think we'd find you so easily." Lucian's hand twitched, and I noticed the subtle tremor running through his arm, restrained power barely contained. "Turn back now, Kale," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You won't get what you came for." Kale's lips curled into a twisted grin. "We're not here for you." His gaze slid to me, and I froze. "We're here for her." I felt Lucian's entire body go rigid, a growl ripping from his chest. Deep, guttural, animalistic. I had never heard anything so raw, so primal. It sent chills down my spine. "She's under my protection," Lucian snarled. "Touch her, and you die." For a second, the clearing held its breath. The rogues tensed. Lucian stepped forward, and then everything exploded. The rogues lunged, faster than my eyes could follow. Lucian shifted mid-motion, his body twisting, bones snapping, fur bursting from his skin. In seconds, the man was gone, replaced by a massive, midnight black wolf, his amber eyes burning like fire. He met the first rogue head-on, slamming into him with bone-shaking force. The second rogue tried to flank him, but Lucian was faster. He spun, jaws snapping, and the rogue yelped as blood sprayed the clearing. I stumbled backward, my chest heaving, my vision blurring. The fight was brutal, savage, and terrifyingly beautiful. A deadly dance beneath the cold, indifferent moon. When it was over, Lucian stood victorious, his black fur streaked with blood, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. The rogues fled into the shadows, limping, defeated but not destroyed. Slowly, painfully, Lucian shifted back, collapsing to his knees, sweat dripping from his brow. His breathing was harsh, ragged, but his eyes, those burning amber eyes, found mine immediately. I rushed to him without thinking, kneeling beside him. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," he rasped, shaking his head, though his body trembled. I hesitated, my hand hovering over his arm, then finally touched him. Warmth surged through me like an electric current, the bond between us pulsing, alive. He looked at me, then truly looked, and something unspoken passed between us. We were bound now, by blood, by danger, by something neither of us could fight anymore. And under the cold, haunting light of the moon, I realized the truth I had been running from since the moment I met him. Lucian wasn't just a protector. He wasn't just a cursed alpha. He was mine, and the world was about to burn because of it. The forest was a storm of shadows, silvered by the lingering light of the blood moon. Each tree seemed taller, every shadow deeper, as if the very woods themselves were alive, watching. My chest burned with a mixture of adrenaline and fear as I followed Lucian, his presence a tether I couldn't ignore even as the danger thickened around us. We moved through the underbrush silently, boots barely making a sound, my fingers brushing against the wet bark of the trees. I had learned quickly that in this world, sound was a weakness. Every snap, twig, or rustle could spell death, and I felt it now more acutely than ever. Lucian was ahead, his movements fluid, predatory, every step deliberate. The tension in his shoulders, the tight line of his jaw, the faint twitch of his claws beneath the fabric of his sleeves, it all screamed control barely maintained. He was a storm caged, and I felt the pull of it like a tide against my own chest. Imagined reaching out, threading my fingers through it, grounding myself in his warmth, but I quickly looked away, my cheeks heating despite the cold. "You should stay closer," he said, his deep, gravelly voice breaking the fragile silence. I frowned. hugging myself as I quickened my pace to walk beside him. "I thought you said I was safe with you." "You are," he replied without looking at me, his jaw tightening. "But being safe doesn't mean being careless. Not tonight." Something in his tone sent shivers down my spine. I wanted to ask what he meant, but I was afraid of the answer. For a while we walked without speaking, the only sounds being the crunch of wet leaves beneath our boots and the distant hoot of an owl. But when we reached the ridge overlooking the valley, Lucian stopped abruptly, nostrils flaring, his entire body tense as if carved from stone. "Lucian," I whispered, stepping closer. His hand shot out instinctively, pulling me behind him. His touch burned like wildfire against my wrist. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice low, commanding, almost primal. Then I smelled it, sharp, metallic, unmistakable. Blood. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, long and mournful. It didn't sound like Lucian's pack. My throat went dry. "What is it?" "Rogues," he muttered, his amber eyes darkening with something feral. "They're close." My heart thundered as I glanced around the forest, expecting something monstrous to leap from the shadows at any moment. But Lucian didn't move, not yet. He was listening, his body vibrating with restrained energy, his heightened senses reading the world around us in ways I couldn't comprehend. Then, as though on some silent signal, he grabbed my hand and started moving fast, weaving between trees, silent and deadly, pulling me along. "Lucian, wait, they've caught your scent," he hissed, his breath ragged. "We need to move." My chest tightened painfully. "My scent? Why me?" He glanced back at me briefly, his expression unreadable. "Because you're mine." The words slammed into me like a tidal wave, knocking the air out of my lungs. He didn't elaborate, didn't give me a chance to question him, just tightened his grip and pulled me harder through the forest as if the very earth beneath us had turned hostile. Somewhere behind us, branches snapped, and I caught sight of two shadows darting between the trees fast to fast. Panic surged through me, but Lucian's voice cut through it like steel. "Don't look back. Just run." And I did. I ran with everything I had, the cold air slicing into my lungs, my legs burning with effort. I couldn't hear anything except my own pounding heartbeat and the roar of blood in my ears, but Lucian's presence was a constant ahead of me, beside me, behind me, always there, always watching. Finally, we broke into a small clearing bathed in silver light. Lucian stopped, pushing me gently behind him, his shoulders squaring as he faced the darkness, and then they emerged. Two figures stepped out from the shadows, their eyes glowing unnaturally, their movements predatory. They weren't in wolf form yet, but there was something unmistakably wrong about them, wild, untamed, dangerous. "Lucian," one of them sneered, his voice deep and mocking. "Didn't think we'd find you so easily." Lucian's hand twitched, and I noticed the subtle tremor running through his arm, restrained power barely contained. "Turn back now, Kale," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You won't get what you came for." Kale's lips curled into a twisted grin. "We're not here for you." His gaze slid to me, and I froze. "We're here for her." I felt Lucian's entire body go rigid, a growl ripping from his chest. Deep, guttural, animalistic. I had never heard anything so raw, so primal. It sent chills down my spine. "She's under my protection," Lucian snarled. "Touch her, and you die." For a second, the clearing held its breath. The rogues tensed. Lucian stepped forward, and then everything exploded. The rogues lunged, faster than my eyes could follow. Lucian shifted mid-motion, his body twisting, bones snapping, fur bursting from his skin. In seconds, the man was gone, replaced by a massive, midnight black wolf, his amber eyes burning like fire. He met the first rogue head-on, slamming into him with bone-shaking force. The second rogue tried to flank him, but Lucian was faster. He spun, jaws snapping, and the rogue yelped as blood sprayed the clearing. I stumbled backward, my chest heaving, my vision blurring. The fight was brutal, savage, and terrifyingly beautiful. A deadly dance beneath the cold, indifferent moon. When it was over, Lucian stood victorious, his black fur streaked with blood, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. The rogues fled into the shadows, limping, defeated but not destroyed. Slowly, painfully, Lucian shifted back, collapsing to his knees, sweat dripping from his brow. His breathing was harsh, ragged, but his eyes, those burning amber eyes, found mine immediately. I rushed to him without thinking, kneeling beside him. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," he rasped, shaking his head, though his body trembled. I hesitated, my hand hovering over his arm, then finally touched him. Warmth surged through me like an electric current, the bond between us pulsing, alive. He looked at me, then truly looked, and something unspoken passed between us. We were bound now, by blood, by danger, by something neither of us could fight anymore. And under the cold, haunting light of the moon, I realized the truth I had been running from since the moment I met him. Lucian wasn't just a protector. He wasn't just a cursed alpha. He was mine, and the world was about to burn because of it. The forest was a storm of shadows, silvered by the lingering light of the blood moon. Each tree seemed taller, every shadow deeper, as if the very woods themselves were alive, watching. My chest burned with a mixture of adrenaline and fear as I followed Lucian, his presence a tether I couldn't ignore even as the danger thickened around us. We moved through the underbrush silently, boots barely making a sound, my fingers brushing against the wet bark of the trees. I had learned quickly that in this world, sound was a weakness. Every snap twig or rustle could spell death, and I felt it now more acutely than ever. Lucian was ahead, his movements fluid, predatory, every step deliberate. The tension in his shoulders, the tight line of his jaw, the faint twitch of his claws beneath the fabric of his sleeves, it all screamed control barely maintained. He was a storm caged, and I felt the pull of it like a tide against my own chest. "We're close," he whispered, voice low, almost a growl, carrying a weight I could feel in my bones. "The rogues have a leader. He's more dangerous than the rest. If we're caught off guard, we won't survive." I swallowed hard, trying to steady the quiver in my hands. "And if we find him?" I asked, though my voice trembled. "What then?" Lucian's eyes, amber and luminous under the moonlight, locked onto mine. For a moment, the predator, the alpha, the wolf, all faded, leaving only the man beneath, vulnerable, raw, and entirely present. "Then we end this, once and for all. But you have to trust me, Ivy, not just with your life, but with yourself." I nodded, unsure if I could, unsure if I even fully understood what that meant. But the moment his hand brushed mine, warmth spread through me, grounding and terrifying all at once. The underbrush gave way to a small clearing, fog curling along the damp ground. In the center, a figure waited, tall, lean, eyes glinting with malice under the crimson light. The rogue leader. His smirk was a knife against the silence. "Lucian," he drawled, voice silk and venom. "You always find your mate, don't you? Funny, you think you can protect her from me?" Lucian stepped forward, the forest seeming to bend around him, his aura radiating dominance and danger. "She is under my protection," he said, voice low and lethal. "Step forward, and you'll regret it." The rogue's smirk widened. "She?" His gaze flicked to me, and I felt the heat of his stare as if it could pierce my skin. "You're just a human. How could she matter to a wolf like you?" Lucian's growl vibrated through the air, low and dangerous. His body shifted subtly, the tension coiling, muscles flexing beneath his skin, claws grazing the fabric of his sleeves. I realized then this wasn't just a threat. This was a challenge, and Lucian was ready to transform every ounce of his being into fury to protect me. The rogue lunged. Everything happened at once. Lucian moved faster than I could follow, intercepting the strike with impossible strength. I stumbled back, watching as his body blurred, shifting first partially, then completely, bones and muscles reconfiguring in a symphony of power. Within seconds, the man was gone, replaced by a massive wolf, black as midnight, eyes glowing gold like molten fire. The battle was brutal, swift, and terrifying. The rogue leader snarled, claws tearing at Lucian's flank, teeth snapping inches from his face. But Lucian met every strike with precision, strength beyond anything human, his growls mingling with the snapping of branches and the echo of the blood moon overhead. I crouched, hands pressed to my mouth, heart hammering in my chest. The sight of him, powerful, feral, dangerous, tore at something deep inside me. It was fear and longing all at once, a pull I couldn't resist, a bond I couldn't deny. Finally, with a feral roar, Lucian lunged, jaws clamping around the rogue leader's shoulder. The man shrieked, twisting, but Lucian held him firmly, shaking him with an inhuman strength that made the ground beneath my feet tremble. Then slowly, deliberately, Lucian released him. The rogue crumpled, defeated, his dominance shattered. Lucian shifted back, collapsing to his knees, fur slicked with sweat and blood, breathing harsh and ragged. I ran to him, hands trembling as I touched his arm, tracing the muscles and fur, grounding him and myself. You did it, I whispered, voice cracking. You won. He shook his head, still catching his breath. We did it, he corrected, amber eyes locking on mine. Because you stayed, because you didn't run, because you're mine. I felt the pull then, the bond igniting fully. A fire that burned through my veins, tethering my heartbeat to his, our fate sealed by something ancient and unstoppable. I leaned into him, wrapping my arms around his neck as he pulled me close, his warm, solid body against mine. Ivy, he murmured, voice low and intimate, vibrating with exhaustion, triumph, and something softer, tender. You don't understand. You complete me. You're not just a mate, you're the part of me I thought I'd never have. And now, nothing can take you from me. Tears welled in my eyes, a mixture of relief, fear, and a desperate joy. I don't care what the world wants, I whispered. I'm yours, always. Lucian's lips pressed to my forehead, a gentle yet possessive claim that sent a shiver down my spine. Around us, the forest was quiet now, the rogues defeated, the blood moon hanging heavy and still above. For the first time, I felt a fragile kind of peace, not safe, not certain, but ours, and in that moment, I realized something that scared me as much as it thrilled me. The hunt might be over, but the bond, the fire, the destiny between us had only just begun. The forest had fallen into an uneasy silence. The blood moon lingered in the sky, casting a crimson glow over the aftermath of the battle. Fallen leaves were stained with dark patches where rogue blood had soaked the earth, and the scent of iron hung thick in the damp air. Every rustle of the trees felt amplified, every shadow seemed to watch, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. I crouched beside Lucian, my hands trembling as I touched his arm. His wolf form had reverted to human, though exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. Sweat and blood streaked his dark hair, and the tension in his body had not fully released. He breathed heavily, amber eyes locked on the clearing as though expecting another attack. It's over, I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. They're gone. Lucian shook his head slightly, a low groan escaping his throat. It's never truly over, he murmured, his voice hoarse. The rogues are only a symptom. The Alpha Council, the power struggles, they won't stop. I swallowed, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on me. This world, so dark and dangerous, had pulled me into its depths. But in the midst of it all, I had found him, Lucian, my mate, my protector, the storm I could not resist. He finally shifted his gaze to me, amber eyes softening as the wild intensity faded, replaced by a profound vulnerability. I should never have brought you into this, he admitted. It's too dangerous, too much for you to bear. I cupped his face in my hands, forcing him to meet my gaze. Lucian, look at me. I'm here. I'm not leaving. You don't get to protect me by hiding me from everything. We face this together, whatever comes next. A faint smile tugged at his lips, though exhaustion shadowed it. Together, he agreed, voice barely above a whisper. For a long moment, we simply held each other, grounding ourselves in the fragile peace that had settled over the clearing. My fingers traced the bruises on his arms, the cuts along his shoulders, and each mark told a story of sacrifice, of strength, of survival. And as I traced them, I realized the depth of what we had endured, not just the battle with the rogues, but everything leading up to this moment, the secrets, the fear, the slow burning bond that had grown into something unbreakable. I can feel it, I murmured, almost to myself. The bond, it's stronger than before. It's like it's alive. Lucian's hand covered mine, warmth seeping into my skin. It's alive because it's real, he said softly. Because you're real. Because we're real. The forest was quiet again, but this time the silence felt different, protective, sacred. The air was still charged with magic, with the energy of the blood moon, with the undeniable tether that now linked us mate to mate, heart to heart, soul to soul. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of the past few nights settle over me. The fear, the adrenaline, the uncertainty, all of it was still there, but beneath it, there was a new certainty. We had each other. That bond was unshakable, a force stronger than any threat lurking in the shadows. Lucian pulled me close again, pressing his forehead to mine. I promised you protection, he whispered, and I always will. But there's more than just the rogues we have to face. The council, the other packs, they will test us. They will challenge this bond. Are you ready for that, Ivy?